Nearly 2 years ago, one of the most lopsided trades of all time went down on the Pacers and Kings. Or at least, that's what experts thought at the time and in the moment. As now 2 years later, the Sabonis-Haliburton swap, it's one of those rare win-win trades in the short term and the long term for both franchises. And look, back in 2022, the overall hysteria of the Kings trading Haliburton, getting called a poverty franchise, saying they were robbed, all that energy isn't really present nowadays that Sacramento is good with Sabonis. But when it comes to Haliburton, I can't help but still say it. This guy a tad bit is overhyped when it comes to the media. Is he great? Of course. Will he be an all-star? Undoubtedly. But when you have former NBA players and fans saying Haliburton's the best point guard in the league, in the quote-unquote conversation, whatever that means, and one of the 10 best players in the world, you are indeed a tad bit overrated if you're Tyrese Haliburton. And look, I do get it. Phenomenal passer, much improved scorer, and Indiana plays a great brand of basketball. But one aspect of his game that is severely overlooked, virtually ignored, is the defensive end. As Haliburton ranks 118th in defensive plus-minus, barely ahead of Malik Beasley. And for defensive win shares, even worse at 275th. And for the overall Pacers team, they are dead last in team defense. Look, when it comes to the Haliburton hype train, in the last week, it's officially gone off the rails. As Haliburton in his career, not once has led his team to a winning record, let alone a playoff berth. And if you're going to get thrown in there with Steph Curry, Luka, SGA, Dame Lillard, there's elite offensive guards, elite point guards. You gotta at least make the play-in tournament one time in your career at this point. And look, when it comes to Tyrese, it's not so much him being overrated as De'Aaron Fox being disrespected. As anytime Haliburton has 40 points, 15 dimes, I see the same old post repeated ad nauseum. Quote, "Did the Kings trade the wrong point guard?" And this right here, I don't really get angry, mad per se, but this post just irritates me on so many levels. Because first off, Haliburton, him playing great, that has nothing to do with Sacramento when a trade that happened 2 years ago. And secondly, De'Aaron Fox as a player, having the best year of his career to date, and isn't chopped liver like this post would have you think. As Fox so far is averaging 30.3 points, that ranks 4th in the NBA, 6.4 assists, 4.7 boards, 1.6 steals, that ranks 8th, on nearly 48% shooting. An important note, for the second straight year, he's leading the NBA in fourth quarter scoring at just under 10 points per game, with no other player even above 9 points in that same category. And I think the most glaring aspect of that post, being completely idiotic, is that Indiana back in 2022, they were in mid-blow-up and kicking off a rebuild, and someone like Haliburton fit their timeline perfectly as a great young asset. And Fox at the time, him being 24, he could have fit that timeline, but in comparison to Haliburton, was a tad bit ahead of what you would want. And looking back at that Sabonis-Haliburton trade, I think now 2 years later, it kind of shows which fans understand team sports and which don't. As real life basketball isn't 2K, where you get the best talent, the best players, ignore fit, ignore positions, and simply win a championship. As both Fox and Haliburton being two dynamic point guards, two great guards, for those Kings team, their roles were eerily similar. And both those players together, their overall value is much less than those two guys apart. As for example, a team like Indiana, in desperate need of a point guard or floor general, he's much more valuable to them than he was Sacramento. And vice versa for Sabonis. The Kings at that point were in desperate need of an offensive big man, which Indiana had and didn't lack. And hypothetically speaking, if the Kings kept both Fox and Haliburton, just based off simple math, understanding basketball, I don't think either of these guys would be as great as they are today. And Fox most likely isn't an all-star winning the fourth quarter player of the year, and Haliburton isn't getting the hype that he has today. All in all, this trade, it benefited Fox, Sabonis, the Kings, the Pacers, Haliburton, and all of Haliburton's teammates who he passes the rock to. And speaking of Haliburton's teammates, in the post-trade with the Pacers, Haliburton's team has gone 44-55, which is on pace for a 36-win season, compared to Fox in the post-Sabonis trade, whose Kings have gone 58-44, which is on pace for 47 wins. And of course, last year they were the 3rd seed, pushed Golden State to 7 games, and this year most likely will be a top 5 seed, very similar to the Indiana Pacers. And for a team like Sacramento, who've been a basketball wasteland for so long, absolute garbage, stuck in the basement of the NBA, getting someone like Sabonis changed their entire culture, as once they got him, they made the playoffs the first time since '06, and by winning 48 games, it was the most since 2005. If you say Haliburton is better than Sabonis, I'm not going to argue with you in the slightest. But please don't understate, Sabonis' overall value was highly important to the Kings in the overall growth as a franchise. Now, looking back at Haliburton and his Pacers, I think this year coming into the season, they only had 1 game on national TV, which is an absolute crime. As teams like the Spurs, who have lost 14 straight games, have 20-25 games on national television. I mean, this Pacers team right here is simply exhilarating, and for League Pass standards are at Hall of Fame potential, being first in points per game, first in field goals made, first in assists, first in offensive rating, and virtually all shooting stats. The Pacers being so dominant offensively in large part goes to Tyrese Haliburton and his great playmaking. And I don't want to go too far, but Haliburton's overall impact, having the ball as much as he does, it is Jokic-esque in terms of impact on the end of the floor. Now, on the flip side, Indiana's defense is the exact 180, and they're completely abysmal. And for someone like Rick Carlisle, this overall trend of going all in on offense and being doo-doo on defense goes back to Dallas with Luka Doncic, as Indiana at this point ranks 21st in fast break points allowed, 20th in defensive rating, 29th in rebounds, 29th in second chance points, 30th in opponents' points per game, and 30th in opponents' points in the paint. As great a story as Indiana is, as exciting as they are, their overall brand of basketball isn't conducive to winning a championship or going far in the playoffs. And looking through NBA history, the late 80s Nuggets are very reminiscent of this team in 2024, as Denver back in the day was all gas, no breaks, scoring 120, 130 points every single night, but routinely failing to go deep in the NBA playoffs. Now, the last thing I do want to talk about is the so-called MVP race. And at this point, look, it's not really a race, it's kind of projections. But even with that being said, if we're going to have these debates, I'm going to take them seriously and rank players accordingly. And look, for someone like Fox, not to crack the top 5, I do get it. But not to crack the top 10 and be an honorable mention, I do find a tad bit insulting. As when Darren plays, the Kings' record is 9-5. And like I said earlier, ranks 3rd in the NBA in scoring and 1st in fourth quarter points per game. For a player like De'Aaron Fox to last year be a first-time All-Star, come back even better. To get the shaft like this is pretty abysmal. And for the Kings' overall team last year, they were kind of the darlings of the NBA, the hot topic that everyone fell in love with. But now a year later, they're kind of the side dish of the NBA, like a day-old tuna sandwich in the microwave that gets completely ignored. So, as always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.